My daughter slid that folder across my kitchen table and said, "Sign it today, Dad." The recording that could have ended everything was already in my shirt pocket. I did not press play. I gave her one chance to tell me the truth herself. That morning started with no warning, no greeting. Just her eyes already measuring whether I would reach for the pen. Axel stood behind her chair. He had positioned himself that way on purpose, I think. Not sitting, standing, like a man who expected to be done and gone inside the hour. My name is Nixon Davis. I am 71, a retired school principal from Columbus, Ohio. I spent 38 years in public schools, and the last thing I expected was to need everything I had ever learned about reading people just to survive breakfast with my own family. That morning, silence was the strongest thing I owned. The folder was blue cardboard with a silver clip, and 3 yellow tabs sticking out along the edge. Warning colors, if you wanted to read it that way. Beside it lay a black pen I had never seen before. Already uncapped, a capped pen asks. An uncapped one expects. Sydney smiled the way people smile when they are trying not to look nervous. "Dad, this is just planning ahead. Nothing scary." Axel gave a small laugh. "At your age, Nixon, better to have these things settled. At my age." I have heard that phrase used like a quiet tool for 20 years now. It sounds like concern. It works like a key. What exactly am I signing?" I asked. Sydney slid the top page toward me. "A limited authorization. It lets me help with calls, accounts, appointments. If something happens, I can step in quickly." "If something happens?" Axel repeated. The refrigerator hummed. A truck moved down the street below my window. In the silence between those sounds, I could hear Axel's thumb tapping the back of Sydney's chair. He wanted this over. She wanted me not to notice how much. The night before, my entry camera had picked them up in the hallway outside my door. 10:15 at night. They had arrived early, stopped before knocking, and stood there talking for almost 4 minutes. The audio was not clean, the hallway buzzing under their voices, but I had listened twice with the volume all the way up. Axel said my signature had to happen before Friday. Sydney said I would ask questions. Then Axel said, "Not if you keep him focused on safety." I sat with that sentence a long time the night before. Even now, it sits differently than most things I have heard in my life. Here is something I have never told anyone. The entry camera was Sydney's idea. 2 years ago, she had said it was for safety. "People break into these buildings, Dad. You should have one." I agreed and installed it the following week. The recording now sitting in my shirt pocket came from the camera my own daughter had suggested I put up. I still do not know exactly what to feel about that. Some things you turn over in your mind for a while before they are ready to be said out loud. So there I was at my own kitchen table, the phone in my pocket, the recording saved to 2 places, and my daughter smiling at me across a blue folder she had not opened herself. I could put the phone on the table right then. Pressed play. Watched both their faces change. I did not. Instead, I picked up the first page and read it slowly. Authorized communication. Account assistance. Emergency discretion. 3 phrases that sound like help and read like access. "Who suggested this?" I asked. "What do you mean?" Sydney said, "I mean, who told you I needed this? Today." Specifically this morning, Axel's hand stopped moving behind her. His smile pulled tighter. Sydney looked at the folder, then back at me. "We talked about it as a family," she said. It just seemed responsible. She reached across and touched my sleeve. "Dad, please don't make this cold. We are trying to protect you." And there it was, the framing I had seen in 38 years of schoolwork. Question something, you are being difficult. Hesitate, you are ungrateful. They had dressed pressure in a cardigan and called it love. I folded the page back into the folder. "I am not signing anything this morning." Sydney's face moved before she could catch it. Fear, then something flatter. Axel pressed both palms flat on the table. "Nixon, delays can cause real problems," he said. "Then we will survive a delay." Nobody spoke. Sydney swallowed. "How much time do you need?" "Enough to read every page." "Every line." She pressed her lips together. Axel looked at the pen, then at me. I think he had built this morning around a smaller version of me. A man who would sign just to keep the room comfortable. He did not know I had stopped keeping that kind of peace. I stood up and took the folder with me. "I will hold on to this," I said. "When I have read it properly, I will be in touch." Sydney started to say something, but Axel touched her shoulder. Not a comforting touch. She closed her mouth. They left. A thin hug from Sydney, a polite nod from Axel. When the door clicked behind them, I placed the folder in the bottom drawer of my desk. Then I copied the recording to a second location. The phone and the papers went in different drawers. They did not belong together yet. I sat back down at the kitchen table. My coffee from that morning was still there, cold, untouched since before they arrived. I drank it cold, not because I wanted to, just because it was there, and I needed something to do with my hands. Here is the thing nobody tells you about a moment like that. I did not feel brave. I stood in my kitchen with one hand on the counter, and what I felt was something cracking quietly inside a wall I had been pretending was solid for a long time. If you have ever discovered that someone you trusted had been moving things around you without asking slowly, one small form at a time, you already know that feeling. It is not anger, not at first. It is more like the floor shifting under furniture you thought was bolted down. I want to stop and ask you something right now, before we go any further. If you'd been sitting at that table that morning, recording already in your pocket, and your family pushing papers at you, what would you have done? Would you have pressed play right there? Or would you have waited the way I did? I am genuinely asking. Hold that question as we go. Before that morning, my life ran on routine. My apartment sat 2 blocks from the public library, close enough to walk even when my knees complained. Most mornings, oatmeal, the local paper, a check of the bulletin board downstairs for neighbors who needed a ride somewhere. 38 years as a principal leaves a man with habits. I still woke before 6. Still carried a pen in my shirt pocket. Still noticed when someone was not being straight with me by how quickly they corrected themselves. Afternoons I walked. The little park behind the library, a nod to the crossing guard, a stop inside to sit with adults practicing job applications or reading letters from their landlords. You watch a grown person sound out a sentence and understand for the first time what it says, and you see something genuinely open in them. That work meant something to me. That was the life I was protecting. Nothing grand. Just mine. Sydney used to tease me about the routine. "Dad, you make schedule look like religion," she would say. I always took that as a compliment. After her mother left when Sydney was 14, routine was what kept the lights on. Lunches packed. Report cards signed. I remember one Thursday night when she was 16, she had a fight with a girl from school. One of those fights teenagers believe are permanent. She sat at this same kitchen table until past midnight, not talking, just needing someone to be in the room. I made oatmeal. Neither of us wanted, and we sat there together until she felt steady enough to sleep. I raised her through slammed doors, scholarship essays, the first apartment she rented with girls who never cleaned the kitchen. When she became a mother herself, I thought the hard years had turned into something gentler. So when she stopped calling just to talk, I told myself she was busy. When messages came right before she needed something, I called it adulthood. A ride for the kids. A check held until Friday. A signature on a form she said was confusing. Axel came into our family with polished shoes and careful manners. In front of neighbors, he called me Mr. Davis. Alone, he explained my own insurance to me slowly, as if I had not spent decades reading budgets and state contracts. At first, I forgave it. He was younger, and some men confuse speed for wisdom. But little things shifted. Bank statements moved to email because Sydney said paper clutter stressed me. The retirement office called her first once, then apologized to me like I had misplaced myself. Small forms started appearing. Permission to discuss an appointment, approval to update an emergency contact, a digital login. Sydney said she would help organize because everything is online now. I signed some, refused others. I told myself families did not keep score. Then came the dinners where my life was discussed without me in the conversation. Thanksgiving at Sydney's. They talked about whether I should renew my lease before anyone thought to ask if I wanted to move. One Sunday, Axel mentioned assisted living the way you mentioned traffic. Sydney said, "Not now, Axel." But she did not say, "He decides that himself." That difference stayed in my chest for a long time. The moment I remember most clearly. Their living room, grandchildren watching something loud in the other room, Axel looking up from his tablet and saying, very gently, "Your dad probably shouldn't be handling these financial products alone anymore." I looked at Sydney. She stared at the carpet, reached for a glass of water she did not drink. Silence does a particular kind of damage when it shows up exactly where someone should have spoken. After the folder morning, I let all of it line up in my mind. The small forms, the redirected mail, the calls that went to her first. None of it looked accidental anymore. It looked practiced. What hurt most was not the paperwork. It was realizing I had been reclassified somewhere along the way. Not father, not Nixon Davis, something closer to a responsibility requiring management. That afternoon I went through old mail I had pulled from a shoebox in the hall closet. Envelopes I had never opened, because Sydney had told me months before that she was tracking the important ones online. Most were routine. Then I found one I did not recognize. A business envelope, return address from a lending company across the city. My name on the front. Inside, I was listed as primary guarantor on a draft expansion agreement. Axel's business name was at the top of the page. The document was dated 3 weeks before Sydney ever brought the folder to my kitchen table. I read it twice. Then I placed it face down on the table and sat still for a few minutes. So this had not started the morning they came with the folder. This had started a month before that, maybe longer. I thought about all the small forms again, the email redirect, the phone calls rerouted. None of it had been accidental. It had been preparation. Here is something I want to ask you before we go further. Have you ever found something, a document, a message, a small, quiet fact that suddenly made every confusing thing from the past few months snap to a shape you could finally recognize? That moment when the scattered pieces arrange themselves and you realize you were not imagining it. If you have been through that, you already know what I was sitting with at that table. Leave a comment when you are ready. We will keep going. I called Martin Keller that evening. Martin had spent 26 years in the county records office and had the kind of patience that made nervous people tell the truth by accident. I told him I had some papers I needed a clear head to look at. He said, "Come by the old building tomorrow morning. I still have access." The county annex on Jefferson smelled the way government buildings smell. Old carpet, document ink, and something faintly metallic that never quite goes away. Martin was waiting just inside the entrance. We found a small conference room on the second floor. The window looked out onto the parking lot and a maple tree just beginning to turn. I remember thinking it was a strange morning to be sitting indoors doing paperwork. Martin spread everything across the table, read quietly, asked 2 questions, circled 3 dates on the lending document, and tapped his pen near one particular line. "Nixon," he said, "the issue is simple. You need to know what you signed, what you never agreed to, and what somebody else assumed they could explain for you." That sentence settled in my chest like a key, finding a lock it was made for. The next morning I walked to the bank. It takes about 20 minutes on foot when my knees cooperate. That morning, they did not particularly cooperate. I walked anyway. When I got there, I sat on the bench outside the entrance for a few minutes before going in. An older man came out of the doors and nodded at me. Neither of us said anything. I sat there long enough to watch a sparrow land on the edge of a concrete planter, look around like it had questions nobody could answer, and fly off. Then I went inside. The manager printed a summary of contact preferences. My email address was correct. But there was a secondary email added 2 months earlier. Sydney's name was inside it. "She may have helped you set that up," the manager said carefully. "Maybe," I said, because maybe was still the last polite shelter I had. Then she hesitated. To remove the secondary email completely, she needed a specific authorization form that this branch did not keep on hand. She would have to request it. Could I come back in 2 days? I looked at her for a moment. Order the form, I said. I came back 2 days later and stood at that same counter until every change was confirmed, stamped, and dated in front of me. The insurance company and the retirement office took 4 more days and 3 more trips. I will not describe each one. Repetition is how this kind of damage works, and I refuse to give it any more space than it already took. I changed every password, changed security questions to answers that lived only in my own memory. The name of my first homeroom class, 1974. The crossing guard outside my first school. Things that belonged to no one else. I sent a written notice to apartment management. No entry, no keys, no package pickup, no emergency access without my direct permission. I added Martin Keller as my independent contact, not because I expected more trouble, because peace built entirely on hope is not really peace. That same week, I replayed the entry recording one more time. Headphones. Axel, if this doesn't get done before Friday, the lender starts asking why we listed him. Sydney, he's going to ask what it means, Axel. Then keep him on safety. Don't let him turn it into control. A pause, then Sydney. Quieter than everything else. I don't like this. She had still walked in the next morning. Still pushed that folder across my table. Knowing enough to hesitate is not the same as choosing courage. I saved the recording to a drive. Made copies of the lending document, the banknotes, the insurance form, the retirement log, the pages from the folder. Put everything in an envelope and wrote on the front, "Use only if necessary." Then I put it in my desk, and then I did something I had not planned. That Thursday evening, Sydney called. She did not say much. She asked if I was eating well. I said yes. Then she went quiet, and I heard her crying. Not dramatically. Just that soft, tired crying that has nowhere particular to go. She said, "The kids were asking about me. After we hung up, I sat there for a while. I was not thinking clearly about the folder or the recording. I was thinking about that Thursday night when she was 16, sitting at this same kitchen table until past midnight, because a fight with a girl from school felt like the end of everything. She had not needed me to say anything then. She had just needed someone to be in the room." I got up. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk. I took out the folder. I opened it to the first page and read it again. Authorized communication, account assistance, emergency discretion. I picked up the pen from my desk. I held it in my hand for what I think was close to 20 seconds. Then I put it down. Not because I was strong, because I remembered exactly one sentence from the recording. Keep him focused on safety. That sentence had been designed for this exact moment. For the Thursday night phone call. For the soft crying. For the grandchildren asking about me. It had been prepared in advance, placed carefully, and it arrived right on schedule. I put the folder back. I saved the recording to a third location that night. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you something about that moment with the pen. If you had been watching, if you had seen 20 seconds go by and then seen me put it down, what would you have thought? How much do we expect people not to feel the pull at all? Not to feel anything? Leave a thought in the comments when you are ready. The following morning, I called the number on the lending envelope. Not asking for anyone by name. Just the main line. I said I had received a document listing me as primary guarantor on an expansion agreement for a business I did not own, and I had not consented to that in any form. The man who answered transferred me to a woman named Grant Willis. She asked me to confirm the document number. I read it off. She went quiet for a moment, then asked whether there had been any pressure placed on me to agree to this arrangement. I looked at the sealed envelope on my desk. I played 11 seconds, just the part where Axel said the signature had to happen before Friday. Just the part where Sydney admitted I would ask questions. I stopped it there. "That's sufficient for my file," Grant said quietly. "I want to stop here, because this is the moment people always ask me about. Why only 11 seconds? Why not all of it?" The answer is simpler than it sounds. I was not trying to destroy anyone. I was trying to put my name back where it belonged. There is a real difference between those two things, and keeping that difference clear was the only way I could live with what came next. Now, I want to ask you something. When you finally have everything, the full proof, and someone asks how much you want to use, there is that pause before you decide. Would you have held back the same way I did? Or would you have handed over all of it? I think about that question more than I expected to. By evening, Axel called from a number I did not recognize. His voice was tight, controlled, and underneath it, frightened. "You're confused, Nixon. Someone got in your ear. Do you understand how embarrassing this is for all of us?" Sydney called after. She was crying, but this time differently, Dad. "Please, you're making everything worse." I confirmed the truth about my own name, I said. "What happens around that truth belongs to you and Axel." By Monday, the consequences had started moving without any help from me. Grant called to say Axel's expansion file was under review. Without my written consent, the numbers Axel had presented did not hold together. I thanked her and ended the call before she could offer sympathy. I had not ruined Axel's plan. I had simply removed my name from it. He had built something on a foundation that was never offered to him. The bank called next. Sydney could no longer speak for me to strangers, as though I were a misplaced document. That should have felt good. It felt like changing a lock on a door inside my own chest. Axel told people I had misunderstood. My niece Carol called in that careful voice relatives use when they want information, without admitting they have already chosen a side. Said Axel claimed I was confused by online forms and embarrassed about needing help. I did not play the recording for her. I read her the date of the lender's call and one exact line from my written statement. "Outside records are not feelings, Carol," I said. She went quiet. Then, I didn't know it had gone that far. Neither did I thought. I kept that to myself. By Wednesday, Axel's lender requested revised documents. Thursday, a formal delay. Friday, Sydney left a message saying they might lose the storefront lease. She did not say, "I am sorry we listed you without asking." She said, "This is affecting the kids." I sat with that sentence for a while. Guilt is patient. It knows where the old doors are. And the door it was standing at that evening had Sydney's face on the other side. I did not open it. Martin called that weekend. He had heard through county contacts that Axel's business had been stretched thin for months before I ever refused anything. My refusal had not caused the problem. It had only removed the thing Axel had hoped would solve it quietly, without anyone having to admit what had been done. That made Axel smaller and sadder in my mind. He was not a villain in a costume doom. He was a frightened man trying to hold a version of himself together with borrowed materials. That did not excuse what he had done. Understanding why a person does something does not clean what they did. But it changed the shape of what I felt about him. Sydney's part hurt differently. I could understand fear. I could understand a wife protecting a husband under pressure. What I could not fit anywhere was my daughter looking at me and deciding that my usefulness mattered more than my voice. So, I started rebuilding. Quietly, in small, ordinary ways. I canceled Sunday dinners that had started to feel like attendance checks. Went back to the library reading group I had been skipping for months. Started volunteering on Tuesday evenings again, sitting with adults, learning to read government forms, prescription bottles, letters from landlords. Nobody there called me difficult for reading slowly. Nobody smiled while taking the paper from my hands. People thanked me because I sat beside them, not above them. The first Tuesday back, a man named Leonard stumbled through a paragraph and laughed at himself. I told him slow reading was still reading. He nodded like someone had just given him permission to stay in the room. I invited Sydney to lunch the following Thursday. Just her. A small cafe beside the pharmacy, where the waitress knew which booths wobbled. I chose the back table. She arrived 7 minutes late. Gray work clothes, a purse too big for a casual lunch. When she kissed my cheek, I could smell peppermint gum and something she was working hard to hold still in her voice. "Where's Axel?" At his own lunch, I'd imagine. Small laugh. Water came. Sydney opened the menu and stared at it like it might offer a way out. After we ordered soup, I folded my hands on the table. Sydney, is there anything about those papers you didn't tell me? Her eyes came up fast. Dad, that is not an accusation. It is a question. She looked toward the front door, down at the napkin in her lap. For a second, I saw my 14-year-old girl, caught with a report card she had hidden in her backpack. This time she was 41, and she chose a different road. We were trying to make sure you're safe, she said. Safe from what? From confusion, from missing something, from people who might take advantage. I nodded slowly. People. She touched her spoon without lifting it. Dad, everything moves fast now. You forget passwords. You ask me to explain letters. That doesn't mean anything bad. It means you need help. There it was. Soft and careful. My age turned into our argument. I needed help reading fine print, I said. That is not the same as needing someone to run my life. Nobody is running your life. Then why did those papers need to be signed that specific morning? She looked away. The soup came. Neither of us touched it. Steam rose between us. Sydney, if you and Axel are in trouble, say so. If it is money, say money. If there is pressure on you, say pressure. But do not bring me documents and call it care. Her mouth opened. Something shifted behind her eyes, something softer. She almost came through. Then she pulled back. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Axel was right. You turned simple things into a test. That hurt, not because it surprised me, because it sounded rehearsed. Something they had said together before they came to my door. A test gives someone a chance to answer honestly, I said. That's not fair, Dad. What's not fair is using concern as a key to a door I never opened. I had not planned that line. It came out calm, and it changed something for me when I heard it. She pushed her bowl away. So what happens now? You punish us? Embarrass Axel in front of business people. I asked you for truth. You gave me defense. You don't understand what we're dealing with. Then help me understand. Without asking for my signature, first, she shook her head. If you keep refusing, you're making everything harder for all of us. I could have taken my phone out right then. Let her hear Axel's voice from the hallway that night. I did not. I paid the check. We had not touched our soup. Outside, she stood by her car with her arms crossed. Dad, please don't do something you can't take back. I felt the final chance move between us like a train neither of us was going to board. I already did something, I said. I listened. Here is what I want to ask you right now. Have you ever given someone a clear, open door to tell you the truth and watch them decide not to walk through it? Not because they could not, because they chose not to. Most of us have been on one side of that door or the other at some point. What does that moment feel like? Leave a comment below. At home, I moved the recording from the first envelope to a second one. On the front, I wrote 4 words. After Sydney had a chance, the following Thursday, Sydney knocked softly. The kind of knock a person gives when they are no longer certain the door belongs to them. When I opened it, she looked different. Not smaller in size. Smaller in certainty. Can I come in, Dad? I stepped aside. For a little while, she sat across from me at the kitchen table. She did not ask about Axel's file, did not ask what I had sent or what I was still holding. That was the first quiet wisdom she had shown in weeks. I'm sorry, she said. Not because things got complicated. Because I helped make it happen, I let those words sit. Then I asked her one question. When did you know it wasn't right? She did not answer immediately. She looked at the table. Then she said, quietly, before I knocked. I nodded. I thought about something I used to tell students who were struggling. Not the ones who got wrong answers. The ones who were ashamed of wrong answers and wanted to move past them as fast as possible. I would tell them, the most important skill is not getting it right the first time. It is being willing to sit with a wrong answer long enough to understand why it was wrong. That is where the real learning happens. Not in the right answer. In the honest sitting. Sydney had not done that sitting yet. But she had said before. That was a start. If you want to find your way back, I said, start there. Not with paperwork. Not with tears used as argument, just with whatever comes after before, she nodded. Crying quietly, not performing it. I love my daughter. That has not changed and will not change. But love does not hand anyone the controls to a life they were not given. I never played the rest of that recording for her. I did not need to watch her break further. Some truths only need to help a person leave a role they should never have accepted in the first place. Now, before I close, I want to ask you something I have been sitting with since all of this settled. When you see someone you care about, an older parent, a neighbor, a friend, being slowly moved from a person to a problem, one redirected call at a time, one small form at a time, what do? Do you say something? Or do you tell yourself it is probably fine and look away? There is no small version of that question. Leave a comment below. Tell me where you are watching from. The following Tuesday, I went back to the reading circle. Leonard was there again. He had been practicing on his own since the last session. You could tell by the way he held the page now. Less grip, more like he trusted it to stay still. He read a full paragraph without stopping, then read another. By the third one, his voice had a steadiness to it that was not there the week before. At the end of the session, he folded his paper carefully, once, then again, and slid it into the breast pocket of his jacket. The same pocket where I keep my pen. He did not make anything of it, just tucked it in and reached for his coat. I noticed. I did not say anything. Some things do not need to be spoken to mean what they mean. Driving home that night, I stopped at a red light on Elm Street. The recording was still sealed in the second envelope in my desk drawer. Axel's text from that unknown number, still unanswered. The stronger part of the recording, still untouched. Some questions answer themselves if you give them enough time and enough silence. The light turned green. I drove home. I had won something. I want to be honest about that and honest about the cost. There were nights that did not sleep easily. There was grief that still arrived, some mornings, quiet and uninvited, when I thought about the daughter I believed I knew and the version of her that walked into that cafe with her face carefully arranged. But my name was mine again. My accounts, my door, my contacts, my table. Mine. And for the first time in longer than I can point to on a calendar, my life did not need anyone's permission to be at peace. If Nixon's story stayed with you today, I have one question to take with you. What is one boundary you have protected lately, even when it cost you something? Leave it in the comments. Sometimes the bravest thing a person does is also the quietest. And if you believe that dignity does not expire with age, that knowing when to hold something back is sometimes the most powerful move available to you, then you already know why this channel exists. Every story here is for people who understand that silence, patience, and self-respect are not weaknesses. They are the things that hold a life together when everything else is being pulled at. This story uses recreated characters and events to explore themes of family, financial boundaries, dignity, and healing. Names and specific circumstances are fictional.